Before we dive into the frozen winter of 1963 and the secrets hidden in a mailbag, if you enjoy uncovering the lost stories of the Cold War and the ordinary people who changed history from the shadows, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It helps us bring these forgotten files to light. The Washington, D.C. City Post Office, located right next to Union Station, was a beast that never slept. In December of 1963, it was less of a building and more of a mechanical organism, a roaring, clanking, dust-filled leviathan that consumed paper and ink and spat out connections. The air inside the vast sorting floor always tasted the same. A dry cocktail of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, adhesive glue, and the distinctive, slightly acidic tang of millions of envelopes rubbing against one another. It was the smell of the nation talking to itself. For Elias Thorne, a 52-year-old distribution clerk with bad knees and an encyclopedic knowledge of zip codes, which had only been introduced 5 months prior, the noise was a comfort. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of the canceling machines and the rumble of the conveyor belts drowned out the unease that had settled over the Capitol. The city was still mourning. President Kennedy had been gone for barely a month, and the holiday season felt muted, draped in a heavy gray shroud. The flags were at half-staff, but the mail didn't care about grief. The mail didn't stop for tragedies. If anything, the volume increased. People reached out more when they were scared or sad, sending cards that said, "Merry Christmas," but meant, "I hope you're safe." Elias stood at his sorting case, a wooden honeycomb of pigeonholes worn smooth by decades of use. He was a Nixie clerk this week, the guy responsible for the mail that the machines couldn't read, the letters with illegible handwriting, missing stamps, or addresses that didn't make sense. It was a job for the patient and the meticulous, and Elias was both. He was a man of routines. He wore the same gray cardigan every day, ate a ham sandwich on rye at 11 a.m. sharp, and believed that a misdirected letter was a moral failing. "You're slowing down, Eli," a voice called out from the next aisle. It was distinctive, young, brash, and chewing gum. It belonged to Jack Russo, a kid fresh out of the service who treated the mail stream like a race he was trying to win. "Accuracy over speed, Jack," Elias muttered without looking up, his fingers flying with practiced dexterity. He picked up a letter, scanned the scrawl, identified the street as Connecticut Avenue, despite the sender spelling it with a K, and slotted it into the correct bin. If you send a bill to the wrong house, nobody pays. The economy collapses. The Reds win. Jack laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the industrial drone. Yeah. You're the last line of defense, Eli. The guardian of the galaxy." Elias didn't smile. In a way, he believed it. The Cold War wasn't just fought with missiles in Cuba or spies in Berlin. It was fought with infrastructure. If the systems worked, the country worked. If the systems failed, chaos crept in. It was 3:45 p.m. on a Tuesday when the anomaly crossed his desk. It was the height of the Christmas rush, the deluge, as the postmaster called it. The bin of unreadable mail was overflowing. Elias reached in, his hand brushing against the rough texture of cheap envelopes and the slick surface of glossy holiday cards. He pulled out a square envelope, ivory white, heavy stock. He held it for a second longer than usual. A good postal clerk develops a sixth sense in their fingertips. They know what a letter should weigh. They know the balance of a wedding invitation versus a bill versus a love letter. This card, sitting innocuously in his palm, felt dense. Not heavy like it contained a coin or a trinket, but unbalanced. The center of gravity was slightly off, listing to the bottom left. Elias adjusted his spectacles and looked at the address. The handwriting was elegant, almost calligraphic, done in a blue fountain pen ink that had slightly feathered into the paper. Mr. and Mrs. A. Vance, 4201 Cathedral Ave, NW, Washington, D.C. He frowned. He knew Cathedral Avenue. It was a good neighborhood, wealthy, quiet. But the return address in the top left corner stopped him. "Merry Christmas from the Carters, 11902, Elm Street, Oak Haven, Maryland." Elias stared at the return address. His brain, a biological Rolodex of streets and zones, clicked in word. Oak Haven. He knew Maryland suburbs. He knew the expansion developments popping up for the GIs and their families. He knew Elm Streets, There was an Elm Street in every town in America, but 11902. Elm Street in Oak Haven didn't sit right. He had sorted the Oak Haven route 3 years ago when the regular carrier broke his leg. The numbers on Elm Street in Oak Haven stopped at 8,000. It was a short street that ended at a creek. There was no 11,000 block. Fake address, Elias whispered to himself. It wasn't uncommon. People made mistakes. Or sometimes people sent anonymous cards. Secret admirers, estranged relatives trying to reach out without revealing themselves. But usually, those people just left the return address blank. Inventing a specific, plausible-sounding but non-existent house number took effort. He flipped the envelope over. It was sealed tight. The flap was glued efficiently, no gaps. The stamp was a standard 5-cent Christmas stamp, the one with the White House in the tree. "Hey, Jack," Elias called out, breaking his own rule about unnecessary chatter. "Yeah, Pop. You ever hear of an 11,000 block on Elm in Oak Haven?" "Oak Haven? That little burg near the district line?" "No way. That place is tiny." "Why?" "Just a nixie," Elias said, sliding the card to the side of his desk rather than the return to sender bin. "Address on the front is good, though. Cathedral Ave. Technically, he should have just sent it on. The destination was legible. The postage was paid. The return address being wrong didn't invalidate the delivery. But the weight bothered him. That slight, imperceptible shift in his hand. He picked it up again. He ran his thumb over the stamp. It was smooth. He ran his finger over the seal. Smooth. Then he pressed his thumb against the bottom left corner of the envelope, where the weight seemed to settle. There was something in there. Not a folded check, not a photograph. It felt rigid, but thin, incredibly thin, like a second layer of cardstock had been glued inside, but only in that one corner. The roar of the post office faded into a dull hum in Elias's ears. He looked around. The supervisors were on the catwalks, clipboards in hand, watching the flow. The other clerks were heads down, battling the holiday tide. Elias did something he had never done in 25 years of service. He slipped the card into the pocket of his cardigan. The apartment in Adams Morgan was quiet, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the sorting floor. Elias lived alone, surrounded by stacks of books and a collection of model trains he tinkered with on weekends. It was a solitary life, but not a lonely one. He valued his peace. Tonight, however, the peace was disturbed. The ivory envelope sat on his kitchen table, illuminated by the harsh yellow light of the overhead bulb. It looked innocent. A picture of a wreath was embossed on the front. Elias made himself a cup of tea, Earl Grey, and sat down. He felt a gnawing guilt in his stomach. Tampering with the mail was a federal offense, a felony. He could lose his pension. He could go to jail. He should have just put it in the Cathedral Avenue bin and forgotten about it. But the weight, he muttered. He reached for his toolkit, the small leather pouch he used for his model trains. He extracted a pair of fine tweezers and a very sharp, thin hobby knife. He didn't want to open the flap. That would be too obvious if he decided to reseal it and mail it tomorrow. Instead, he wanted to probe. He picked up the envelope and held it up to the light bulb. The paper was thick, high quality. It blocked the light effectively. He couldn't see a silhouette of the contents. Cardstock sandwich, he analyzed. He placed the envelope flat on the table. With the precision of a surgeon, he used the hobby knife to gently lift the very edge of the bottom left corner, trying to separate the front face of the envelope from the back without tearing the paper fibers. It was difficult. The glue was high grade. He worked for 20 minutes, sweat beading on his forehead despite the drafty window. Finally, he created a gap no wider than a hair. He slid the tweezers in. He felt resistance, not paper, something slick. He pushed the knife a millimeter deeper and peeled back a tiny flap of the envelope's lining. There, sandwiched between the inner security tint pattern and the outer white paper, was a small rectangular object. It wasn't a device. It wasn't metal. It was a piece of film. Elias used the tweezers to extract it. It was tiny, maybe half the size of a postage stamp, and completely black. He held it up to the light. It was a negative, a microform transparency. He set the envelope down and exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that fogged the air. This wasn't a Christmas greeting. This was tradecraft. He knew about spies. Everyone in D.C. knew about spies. They read about the Rosenbergs. They watched the news about Colonel Abel. They knew that the city was a chessboard. But spies were supposed to be diplomats in tuxedos or men meeting on park benches in the fog. They weren't supposed to be in his mailbag. He looked at the film again. He needed magnification. He went to his study and retrieved the jeweler's loupe he used for painting the detailing on his model train engines. He returned to the kitchen, wiped the lens on his cardigan, and brought the tiny square of film up to his eye, leaning close to the light bulb. The black square exploded into detail. It wasn't a picture of plans or a map. It was a list, rows and rows of numbers and letters, typed in a font so small it looked like dust to the naked eye. G77A, P. Rot, 1224 V88B, S. Sill, 1226 X99 C. W. Gull, 0101. There were dozens of lines. Elias lowered the loupe, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't know what the codes meant, but he knew what dates were. 1224. Christmas Eve, 1226. Boxing Day, 0101. New Year's Day. This was a schedule. He looked back at the envelope. Mr. and Mrs. A. Vance, 4201, Cathedral of W. Who were the Vances? Were they the spies, or were they the drop? Was the card a signal? The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was holding a piece of the Soviet intelligence apparatus in his kitchen in Adams Morgan, and the moment he had taken it out of the post office, he had inserted himself into the chain of custody. If he went to the police, would they believe him? A postal clerk who stole mail? They might think he forged it. They might think he was crazy. Or worse, if there were moles, and there were always rumors of moles, going to the wrong authority could get him killed. He looked at the film, then at the envelope. He had damaged the corner. It was slight, but a trained eye would see it. He couldn't just put the film back and mail it. The seal was broken. The integrity of the package was compromised. "Think, Eli," he whispered. "Think like the system." The system required tracking. The system required logic. He grabbed a notepad. He copied down the first 3 lines of the code. Then he carefully, with shaking hands, slid the piece of film back into the slit in the envelope. He used a tiny dab of his model glue, a clear, fast-drying adhesive, to reseal the paper layers. He pressed it flat with a heavy book on top. He sat there for an hour, watching the book, waiting for the glue to dry. The silence of the apartment was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, pregnant with a threat he couldn't see. He had to find out who lived at 4201 Cathedral Avenue. The next morning, Elias called in sick. It was the first time in 6 years. He told the supervisor it was a stomach bug, something he picked up from the cafeteria tuna. His voice cracked appropriately. Fear, it turned out, sounded a lot like nausea. He didn't stay in bed. He dressed in his Sunday suit, a brown wool number that was slightly too large for him, and took the bus uptown. He didn't go to Cathedral Avenue. That would be amateurish. If the Vances were being watched by the FBI, showing up at their door would put him on a list. If they were being watched by the KGB, showing up might put him in a grave. Instead, he went to the Hall of Records. Elias was a creature of paper. He understood that people left trails, debris of their existence, in the form of deeds, titles, and taxes. The clerk at the Hall of Records was a young woman with cat-eye glasses who looked bored out of her mind. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," Elias said, trying to project the air of a fussy legal assistant. "I'm doing some probate research for a firm. I need to pull the property records for a residence in the northwest quadrant, Cathedral Avenue. Address? 4201. She sighed, blowing a strand of hair out of her face, and disappeared into the stacks. Elias waited, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. He looked around the reading room. It was empty save for an old man sleeping over a newspaper. The clerk returned with a thick folder. "Here you go. You can't take them out of the room." Of course. Elias sat at a long wooden table and opened the file. He bypassed the recent tax assessments and went straight to the deed of sale. The house had been bought in 1958. Owner of record, Alan and Margaret Vance. He scanned the document for occupation or employer. Nothing. That wasn't required for a deed. But there was a mortgage document from a bank in Riggs. He noted the bank. Then he looked at the previous owner, a trust. He flipped through to the most recent property tax filing. Paid in full. It was all perfectly normal. Too normal. He decided to take a risk. He closed the file and walked over to the Polk directory shelf, the massive city directories that listed residents and their professions. He pulled the 1963 volume, heavy as a cinder block, and thumped it onto the table. He flipped to V. Vance, Alan R., Consultant, Import, Export. 4201 Cathedral Ave NW, Import, Export. The oldest cover in the book. It was vague enough to explain travel, money, and odd hours, but boring enough to stop people from asking follow-up questions. Elias closed the book. He had a name and a generic cover. It wasn't enough. He needed to know if Alan Vance was the traitor or the target. He left the Hall of Records and walked to a payphone. He fished a dime from his pocket. He hesitated. Who could he call? He thought of his brother William. William was a cop in Baltimore. Good man, honest but loud. If Elias told William, William would tell his sergeant, who would tell the captain. And suddenly Elias would be in an interrogation room explaining why he committed a federal felony by opening mail. No police. He needed someone who understood secrets. He thought back to the war. Elias had been logistics, supply chain. He made sure Boots and Beans got to the front. He wasn't a hero, but he had served with men who were. One name surfaced, Saul Berkowitz. Saul had been Army intelligence. Not the James Bond type, but a signals guy, a code breaker. Elias and Saul had bonded over chess games in a damp tent in France in '44. They exchanged Christmas cards, ironic considering the situation, every year. Saul lived in Silver Spring now. He ran a radio repair shop. Elias dialed the number for Berkowitz Radio and TV Repair. Berkowitz, a gruff voice answered. Saul, it's Elias Thorne. There was a pause. Eli, you okay? You sound like you're calling from inside a drum. I'm at a payphone. I need to see you, Saul. Today. I'm open till 6. Bring your toaster or whatever's broken. It's not a toaster, Saul. It's a puzzle. A very small, very dark puzzle. The line went silent for a beat. Saul's voice dropped an octave. Is this a checkmate in 3 moves kind of puzzle, Eli? It's a we might be on the wrong side of the board kind of puzzle. Come to the back door, Saul said. Knock 3 times. Berkowitz Radio and TV Repair smelled of ozone, solder, and dust. The shelves were lined with the skeletal remains of television sets, their vacuum tubes staring out like glass eyes. Saul Berkowitz hadn't changed much since 1944. He was still short, barrel-chested, with a fringe of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He locked the back door behind Elias and flipped the sign on the front door to closed. You look terrible, Eli, Saul said, lighting a cigarette. Like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Elias said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the envelope. He hadn't brought the film itself. He felt safer leaving it in the envelope, the hiding in plain sight theory. But he had his notebook with the copied codes. I work the dead letter shift sometimes, Elias lied, omitting the part about stealing it from the active stream. This came through. The return address is fake. The weight was off. Saul took the envelope. He didn't open it. He weighed it in his hand. He ran a Geiger counterwand over it, a piece of surplus gear sitting on his workbench. Not radioactive. That's a plus, Saul muttered. You opened it? Carefully. I put it back. What was inside? Microdot film, a list, dates, codes. Elias opened his notebook and showed Saul the scribble. G77A, P. Rot, 1224. Saul adjusted his bifocals and leaned over the notebook. He hummed, a low vibrating sound in his chest. P. Rot, Saul read. Prototype? Protocol? Rotterdam? I was thinking locations, Elias said. Or cargo. Saul grabbed a pencil and a scrap of paper. Standard Soviet field cipher is usually a one-time pad. But this looks like shorthand. Operational shorthand. G77A. G could be a designation for a group or a type of tech. 77 is the item. A is the grade. And the dates? Deadlines. Or drop times. Saul looked up. his expression grim. "Eli, if this is what I think it is, this is a shopping list. Someone is placing orders for stolen tech. The recipient is an Alan Vance, Cathedral Avenue." Saul's eyes narrowed. Vance. Never heard of him. But if he's receiving the list, he's not the spy inside the government. He's the handler. He's the middleman. He gets the request from Moscow, encoded in a Christmas card, and he distributes the orders to his moles in the Pentagon or the State Department. So Vance is the hub, Elias realized. "And you're holding his instructions for the next quarter," Saul said. He looked at the envelope. "You have to burn it." "What?" "Burn it, Eli. Flush the ashes. You are a civilian. You are a postal clerk. If the KGB finds out you intercepted this, you're dead. If the FBI finds out you have this and didn't report it immediately, you're in Leavenworth for 20 years. There is no winning move here." Elias took the envelope back. He held it tight. "If I burn it, the order doesn't get delivered." "Exactly. The chain breaks. The spies don't get their instructions. The secrets stay safe." "Or," Elias said, his voice gaining a sudden stubborn strength, "Vance realizes the card is missing. He signals Moscow that the channel is compromised. They go dark. They change their codes. They change their addresses. And the moles inside the government, the ones stealing the secrets, they stay hidden. They just wait for a new handler." Saul stared at him. "You want to catch them." "I spent 25 years sorting mail, Saul, putting things in the right boxes. This Vance guy, he's in the wrong box. I want to put him in the right one." Saul sighed, smoke curling from his nostrils. "You're crazy. You're a crazy mailman." "How do we do it?" "We don't do anything. You have to put it back in the stream. It has to be delivered, but it has to be watched." "I can't watch a house on Cathedral Avenue. I work all day." "No," Saul said, "but you can make sure that when Mr. Vance opens this envelope, he isn't the only one reading it." Saul moved to a shelf and pulled down a small jar of a clear, viscous liquid. "What is that?" "It's a solution we used in the occupation," Saul said. "Silver nitrate and a few other things, invisible to the naked eye. But under ultraviolet light, it glows like a neon sign, and it transfers." He touches the film, it gets on his fingers. He touches his clothes, his desk, his contacts. It marks everything. "You want me to paint the film?" "I want you to tag the bait," Saul said. "Then you mail it. And then we have to make a phone call. Not to the police, to the bureau. But we do it on our terms." The next morning, the card felt heavier in Elias's pocket, as if the chemical solution Saul had carefully applied to the film strip had added the weight of the world. Elias arrived at the post office at 6 a.m., an hour early. The night shift was ending, the floor littered with the debris of the overnight sort. He walked to his station. The air was cold. The heating system was acting up again. He looked around. No one was watching. The supervisors were in the break room drinking coffee. Elias pulled the envelope from his pocket. He had done his best to smooth out the corner he had peeled back. To the naked eye, it looked pristine. He slipped it into the stack of mail destined for Zone 16, Cathedral Avenue. He watched it slide into the canvas bin. It sat there, indistinguishable from the utility bills and holiday flyers surrounding it. "Goodbye," he whispered. The rest of the day was a blur of anxiety. Every time a supervisor walked by, Elias flinched. Every time the phone rang in the office, he assumed it was for him. But nothing happened. The mail moved, the trucks were loaded, the drivers departed. At 3:00 p.m., Elias clocked out. He didn't go home. He went to a phone booth inside Union Station. Saul had given him a number. Not the main FBI tip line, but a direct line to a field office in Alexandria that Saul claimed dealt with foreign counterintelligence. Elias dialed. His hands were sweating against the black plastic receiver. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," a woman's voice answered, crisp, professional. "I have information regarding a Soviet communication channel operating through the U.S. mail," Elias said. He had rehearsed the line in the mirror. "Name? I wish to remain anonymous for the moment." "We don't usually act on anonymous tips, sir." "Listen to me," Elias hissed, his voice dropping. "There is a Christmas card being delivered today to 4201 Cathedral Avenue. Resident Alan Vance. Inside the lining of that card is a microdot film containing encryption codes and dates. The film has been treated with a UV reactive marker. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. The sound of a pencil scratching on paper stopped. "Repeat the address, please," the woman said. Her tone had changed. The boredom was gone. 4201 Cathedral Avenue. The card is from the Carters in Oakhaven, but there is no 11,000 block of Elm Street. "Who is this?" "Someone who does his job," Elias said. "You do yours." He hung up. He leaned his forehead against the cool glass of the phone booth. He had just set the gears in motion. Now he was just a spectator, or so he thought. As he exited the phone booth, he saw a man standing by the newsstand. Trench coat, fedora, reading a newspaper, but his eyes weren't moving across the text. They were fixed on the reflection in the station window, fixed on Elias. Elias's heart stopped. Was it the FBI? Or was it them? He walked briskly toward the exit, merging into the crowd of commuters. He didn't run. Running drew attention. He walked with the determined gait of a man late for a train. He could feel the eyes on his back, a prickling sensation at the base of his neck. He took a cab instead of the bus. He had the driver take a circuitous route, circling the Lincoln Memorial before heading to Adams Morgan. He checked the rear window. No tail. When he got to his apartment, he locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and wedged a chair under the handle. He went to the window and peered through the blinds. A black sedan was parked across the street, 2 men inside. Elias slid down to the floor, sitting in the dark beneath the windowsill. They had found him. How? Had they seen him take the card? Had they been watching the mailbox? He realized then that the invisible river of the post office wasn't as unmonitored as he thought. If the Soviets were using it, they were likely watching it too. Watching for anyone who noticed the anomaly. Elias Thorne, the man who lived by rules and schedules, was now a variable in an equation he didn't understand. And variables usually got eliminated. 3 hours passed. Elias sat in the dark, clutching a heavy brass candlestick holder he had grabbed from the mantel. It was a ridiculous weapon against men who likely carried suppressed pistols, but it was all he had. At 7:15 p.m. the knock came. It wasn't the polite rap of a neighbor. It was a solid, authoritative pounding. "Elias Thorne, federal agents, open the door." Elias didn't move. Was it a trick? The KGB could say they were FBI. "Mr. Thorne, we know you're in there. We saw you enter. We're not here to arrest you, but we need to come in. Now, for your own safety." Elias stood up, his knees popping. He crept to the door. "Badge," he said through the wood. "Slide a badge under the door." A pause. Then a leather wallet slid across the floorboards. Elias picked it up. Special Agent Robert Miller, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The seal looked real. The photo looked like the man he had seen in the sedan, or at least similar enough. Elias pulled the chair away and undid the locks. He opened the door a crack. 2 men stood there. One was Miller, square jaw, tired eyes, smelling of tobacco. The other was younger, carrying a large metal case. "May we come in?" Miller asked. It wasn't really a question. Elias stepped back. The agents entered and immediately swept the room. The younger one went to the window and adjusted the blinds to ensure no one could see in. "You're the one who called," Miller said, turning to Elias. "The mailman. Distribution clerk," Elias corrected automatically. "Right. You tampered with the mail, Mr. Thorne. That's a federal crime." "I found a threat to national security," Elias shot back, surprised by his own anger. "Would you prefer I let it go?" Miller studied him. "We intercepted the card before it hit the carrier's bag for the afternoon route. We scanned it. You were right. Microdot, high-level cipher." Miller paused, stepping closer. "And the lab boys tell me the film was painted with a marker. Is that your handiwork?" "A friend's," Elias said. "I didn't want to lose the trail. You took a hell of a risk. If Vance had checked the seal and noticed it had been tampered with, he would have burned the house down and vanished." "I used good glue," Elias said. Miller actually cracked a smile, a dry, humorless thing. "You did. Better than our guys usually do." The younger agent spoke up. Sir, the surveillance team on Cathedral Avenue reports the subject is home. The lights are on. Miller nodded. He turned back to Elias. Here's the situation, Mr. Thorne. We have the card. We haven't delivered it yet. We held it back. We need to decide how to play this. If we raid Vance now, we get him, and we get the code. But we don't know who he's giving the orders to. We don't know who the moles are. The shopping list, Elias said. Exactly. We need Vance to distribute the orders. We need to see who he contacts. So deliver the card, Elias said. We will, tomorrow. But we need you. Me? Why? Because Vance is paranoid, Miller said. He has a routine. He meets the mail carrier at the box. He knows the regular carrier, a guy named Old Man Jenkins. Jenkins is out sick tomorrow. Flu. Elias blinked. Did you give Jenkins the flu? Miller didn't answer. We need a carrier to deliver the route. Someone who looks like a mailman. Someone who knows the procedure. Someone who won't panic if Vance asks a question. Elias shook his head. I'm a sorting clerk. I don't walk a beat. You did in 48, Miller said. We pulled your file. You walked the Georgetown route for 2 years before your knees gave out. You know how to carry a bag. My knees are still bad. Take some aspirin, Miller said coldly. We need you to deliver that card, Mr. Thorne. We need you to hand it to a Soviet spy, smile, say Merry Christmas, and walk away without tipping him off that the entire U.S. government is watching him from the bushes. Elias looked at the brass candlestick holder still in his hand. He set it down on the table. And if I mess it up, then we lose the war, Miller said. Or at least this battle. What do you say, Eli? Want to serve your country one more time? Elias looked at the gray window, at the reflection of his own tired face. I'll need a uniform, Elias said, and comfortable shoes.